Welcome to another episode of Serial Streamers. And if you're wondering what is Serial Streamers, it is a virtual true crime TV club where we basically go out and watch all the viral true crime documentaries. And then we come back to my social media comments on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. We give our hot takes, our opinions, our theories. There is no judgment. And basically, it's a really great club for people like me who don't really have like a partner or a bestie who's as into true crime content as I am. I mean, certainly they're into it, but not like I am. So when I watch these documentaries, I mean, I want to talk to people about it. I want to share my thoughts, my opinions. And so Serial Streamers is perfect for that. So if you are watching all the viral true crime docs and you want somebody to talk about them with, you found your podcast and your YouTube channel, because I basically do a recap of all these viral true crime documentaries. And so you can listen to it on my podcast, Murderish, or you can listen to it, or you can watch it on my YouTube channel at Jami on Air. And then you come back to the social media comments. I'm at Jami on Air on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, you name it. And then we talk about it. So make sure you are subscribed to my YouTube channel at Jami on Air, as well as my podcast, Murderish. All of the Serial Streamers episodes live in those places. All right, before we get started, I want to give a warning because this documentary is a bit disturbing because it does involve child abuse. So that is a heavy, heavy trigger warning. All right, the documentary we're going to be talking about today is Devil in the Family, The Fall of Ruby Franke. This is a 3-part docuseries on Hulu. And buckle up because this one is wild. Ruby Franke is a mom of 6. She's married. She lives in the Utah suburbs at the time this took place. Her husband's name is Kevin. He is a professor, a PhD, and it's kind of described in the documentary that they're not rich or well off by any means, but they're not super duper struggling. I guess they're just somewhat comfortable. Ruby is a devout Mormon, as is her family, and she's always striving to follow Jesus Christ and keep her promises with God. She looks to me very much like a lot of Utah family vlogger moms. She's blonde, she's white, she's thin, she's attractive, and she just looks a lot like the Utah momfluencers. And Kevin, her husband, is a self-described nerd. He says that he really was insecure growing up. And I think that I got the impression that when he was able to get Ruby to be in a relationship with him, he probably thought he hit the lotto, because I don't think that he probably felt like he was enough for her. She was somebody who was very attractive. She had, a number of men courting her at the time that Kevin was also interested. In January of 2015, the Franke family posts their first video on YouTube. And it's this video of Ruby cutting a cake open to reveal the gender of their next baby. She was pregnant at the time. And after that, they published it to her YouTube channel. And it just blew up. I mean, the comments are like, oh my God, your family's so perfect, so cute. We want to see more. Oh my gosh, perfect family. So, well, you can imagine that Ruby and also the members of her family kind of got hooked from that moment on, because they're getting all this adoration, all these compliments. Everybody's like, your family's perfect. You're so adorable. We're in love with your son. Post more. So that's exactly what they did. From then on, Kevin, Ruby, and their 6 kids became 8 passengers on YouTube. And their following just blew up from there. They eventually got to over 1 million followers. And they were basically, 8 Passengers was a YouTube channel all about parenting, marriage, and raising children. And the brand deals and monetization started to roll in. Kevin describes it in the documentary. When they got their first check, it was $85. And to him, it's like, no, this is not an astronomical amount of money, but it's like, this is money that they weren't getting before. And he's like, I want more. And eventually their popularity soared. And so did the check amounts. And Kevin describes it as that there were some months they were making over $100,000 a month just from their 8 Passengers YouTube channel. From there, they sold their modest house in the Utah suburbs and moved to a neighborhood in Springville, Utah, which is called Happy Valley. And Springville, the neighbors describe it as idyllic, perfection, safe, peaceful neighborhood. Again, it's called Happy Valley. And everybody there is supposedly really happy and very family oriented, and it's safe and it's quiet and everybody knows everybody, and just sort of like that idyllic neighborhood in the suburbs that you would want to raise your family in. But there's one gentleman in the documentary, I think his name is Brennan Patrick. He's a therapist of some kind. I want to say he also lived in the neighborhood, but don't quote me on that. He says that people in Happy Valley, yes, they're happy, but they are stuck in a box, like stuck in a bubble of, of this culture of perfectionism and wanting to be perfect. And this is the capital of the Mormon church. So everybody, largely, this neighborhood and the surrounding neighborhoods and Utah in general, I guess, I don't know. I have family in Utah and they're not Mormon, but they have a lot of Mormon friends. I don't really know how it works, if there's certain sectors of Utah that are Mormon and others that are not. But certainly it's described in the documentary that Springville or Happy Valley was very heavily populated by Mormon families. And there is this teaching in Mormonism, or it's kind of taught in Mormonism. And forgive me because I am not a religious person, so I am probably going to F some of this stuff up, but I'm going by what people in the documentary kind of describe things as. But this Brennan Patrick says that Mormons are taught that in order to get to the highest degree of glory, they strive for perfection, because apparently the cleaner and more perfect type of life that you live, the more likely you are to get into heaven. And so there is this anxiety, this Mormon anxiety and pressure to be as perfect as you can be so that you can get into heaven. And there's also a lot of pressure to share your happiness and your perfect family and your lifestyle with the world. And this, in my opinion, is proselytizing, like spreading the word of Mormonism through growing a platform on YouTube, for example, and posting content and showing the world how happy Mormons are, how happy your particular Mormon family is. And essentially that would make other people want to join the Mormon church, which is something they're taught to do. And Utah is really known for being the epicenter for family vlogging. We've all seen these family vloggers, and they all do appear to be super happy and playful and fun and wholesome and clean, and their children are just so perfect and probably getting straight A's in school and so well behaved. But for me, this is a huge red flag, and I'm just talking from my own personal experience. Anytime I see very heavily curated videos and photos of families, on Instagram, let's say, or YouTube, whatever it is. And every photo and every video is of them being and looking perfect. I'm immediately like, red flag, because that I know from experience. I have 3 children. I have a granddaughter. I'm a mom. I'm a wife. I have a family. I come from a family. I know that is not what family always looks like. I know that children are not always well behaved. Sometimes they're tired. Sometimes they're sick. Sometimes they're irritated. Sometimes they're just downright rude and stubborn and they don't want to do what you're telling them to do. So I just am always so turned off by these heavily curated Instagram photos and videos where not a single photo or video is the slightest bit messy. It is just all perfect. It's filtered. Everybody has makeup and coordinated outfits. It's just, I don't buy it, and I'm very turned off by it. And that is not the kind of content that I like to see. So I've never been somebody who is a fan of following family vloggers. I actually find it a lot of times very creepy, because I know that is not what it looks like behind the scenes. And I'm not saying that it's complete, dysfunction behind the scenes. I'm just saying it's just not real. It's not authentic. And it's just, I want to see a little bit of mess. I want to see authenticity. I want to see, there's some dishes in the sink in your kitchen in the background sometimes. And I just am so turned off by it, but it is a very big thing on social media. And a lot of these family vloggers, they gain a following and they gain it fast, because I don't know if it's people are striving for something and they're like, oh my gosh, if that family can do it, so can I. I don't know, but I just think that it is very inauthentic. And Ruby Franke's family is the perfect example of what I'm talking about. And Ruby bought into this, Mormon, this pressure to be perfect. Like she really was striving to be as perfect as possible. She wanted to be seen as like the best mom out there and that her family is doing things the right way and spreading the message of God and getting people to join the church. And she was obsessed particularly with showing the world how perfect her family was, how perfect, in quotes, her family was. But there's all of this unedited footage, video footage of Ruby Franke and her family, and it shows you actually what was going on behind the scenes. And it wasn't at all the bullshit that Ruby Franke was selling to the world. There was dysfunction, there was downright abuse, and we're going to get into that. And the unedited footage shows the reality of trying to be a family vlogger. Because like I said, inevitably, especially when you have 6 kids, there's going to be a few of them or one of them or all of them that are going to have an off day and they're not going to want to film. They're not going to want to behave. They're not going to do what you want them to do and look happy and perfect on camera. So there's this unedited footage and Ruby's like, smiling and she's like, okay, kids, put your smile on. Everybody's happy. And it's like in reality, the kid is rolling their eyes and he's like, ugh, I don't want to do this. I don't want to film. Like, I can't pretend to be happy right now. And she's like, put your smiley face on, kids. And it's just... and she's like screaming at her kids. There's this footage of her going, okay, and today we're going to talk about, like she's getting, she's introing her video for YouTube. And there's like a little bit of noise from her family in the background. She's like, I'm filming. And she like screams in this god-awful scream. And her husband's in the background going, we're trying to get ready for church. That's why there's noise. And she's just screaming and wailing at them to quiet down because she's just got to get this video in for the day. And it's like when it gets to that point, are you having fun? Like, is this really fun for you? And it really becomes about something else. And we'll find out in this documentary that it really wasn't about the money for Ruby. It was about the adoration, the attention, and spreading the word of God and getting people to join the church. But certainly for her husband, I think it was about the money. And he certainly had times when he didn't want to film and he always had a camera in his face, but he was addicted to the income. And I get that. I mean, it is a life-changing amount of money that was coming in. And they describe it in the documentary too, that the kids were kind of like hooked on it at first too. They got a little bit of fame and that certainly the oldest son got a lot of attention. He's an attractive kid and all the girls, at school are like, oh my gosh, it's Chad Franke from the 8 Passengers YouTube channel. But it also just is and can become a very toxic thing when every single day you are expecting your family to be perfect and on point and high energy and, bring in the personality because there's a freaking camera in their face 24/7. And Chad Franke, who's the oldest son in the Franke family, he's reflecting back in the documentary and he said that life was simple in the beginning and they went to church religiously and that Ruby was, in his words, a great mom. In the documentary, they talk about this very colorful data table that is hung up in Ruby's closet. And it basically was a chart of all the men who were courting her at the time. Courting her, it's such like a weird word, but I guess it's just like very dated. But these men were courting her. And so it's all the men's names, but then it also on the other side of the table, it's Ruby listing exactly all the freaking long list of traits that she wanted in a man, including that he had to be 5 inches taller than her, which is hilarious. And I know a lot of women want their man to be like taller than them for whatever reason. But there was just like this laundry list of he has to be 5 inches taller, attractive, nice smile, smart, whatever the things were. Like she literally down to like, is he right-handed or left-handed? I mean, I'm making that up, but she had all these traits that she wanted her man to have. And her husband, Kevin, who wasn't her husband at the time, he was also courting her. So his name was on that list. He saw that data table in her closet. So what he did was he went home and in his words, he cheated. He studied the table and the list and basically became exactly what Ruby had laid out on this table wanted to have in a partner. And it worked because they ended up getting married shortly after that, and they built a life together and they had kids. So he says that he's like this self-described nerd, and she was, had all these men courting her, and she was attractive. He was insecure, but he studied that table boy and he landed her. And Chad, their oldest son, like I said, he's this attractive, blonde-haired like boy, and he's gaining this popularity through this YouTube channel with his family. And so he's getting a lot of interest, from girls, but also what he did was he really was the catalyst to make the 8 Passengers YouTube channel just blow up, because the viewers loved Chad. Not only like the girls who thought he was cute, but he was also just very charismatic, very silly. So he brought the humor to the channel. He's always doing like all these funny, quirky things on camera, and people just loved it. And Ruby Franke tuned into that right away. And she's like, oh, the viewers love Chad, so we need more Chad on the channel to grow this thing. And not only that, they wanted to have his picture and some of the other kids. They learned that putting the kid's picture in the thumbnail photo for the YouTube channel also helped it. So they were really paying attention as to what the viewers liked and how they were going to grow this channel. And it was all centered basically around Chad. And Kevin says in the documentary that Ruby exploited Chad's charisma and charm because she knew it was good for the channel. But what I found interesting was that Kevin says that Ruby exploited Chad, but really in reality, he and his wife exploited their kids, all of them. And the producer gets him to admit, Kevin, to admit that, yeah, I guess I exploited my kids too, Chad particularly. But I just thought it was interesting that he didn't volunteer that from the beginning. He kind of like put it on Ruby, but it's like, no, dude, you did that too. And like I said earlier, Kevin says that it wasn't about the money for Ruby. It's that she always believed that she was meant for a higher power, that she was meant to bring people into the LDS church and into their faith and to spread the word of God, that it really wasn't about the money. And through her YouTube channel, she was able to do that. And I think also that the adoration and the attention that she got, and she was seen as like America's mom, that also didn't hurt. I think that she loved that part of it. So when the Franke family sold their modest home and moved into a larger home in Happy Valley, Springville, Utah, the neighbors said they didn't like Ruby. They said that she was cold, she kept to herself, and that she was always, always, always filming herself, walking around the neighborhood. And they didn't like that they were sometimes captured in the background in the footage and that their homes were being filmed, and that she was essentially doing this without permission. And they didn't like her. Like, she wasn't friendly. She never, associated herself with them, never mingled with them, but they said that they did like Kevin. And eventually, which I think is inevitable for family vloggers, the Franke children start to say, we don't want to film. We don't want to do this today. They're in, a sour mood when the camera turns on. They're like exhausted by always having to be perfect and having to be on all the time. And they're like, we don't want to film. And this really concerned Ruby because her whole life at this point was built around this 8 Passengers YouTube channel. Not only was it their bread and butter and it was the income for the entire family, it was her way of spreading the message of God. So she needed her children to be on camera every single day, and she needed them to be like perfect and happy. But they are expressing to her, we don't want to do this. And so what does she do? She bribes them with money. There's this scene in the documentary, this footage of her going, okay, well, if you don't want to film, I guess you're not going to get $10. Do you want $10? And they're like, yeah, I guess I want my $10. So she's like, well, guess you're going to have to film then if you want your $10. And I just could not have rolled my eyes hard enough that she's just that freaking annoying mom that's like, dude, put the damn camera down. And why don't you like tune into what your kids are telling you right now? Like, their body language and their words are telling you they're fucking exhausted and they don't want to do this, and that bribing them with $10 to do it ain't it. And the daughter, Sherry, the oldest daughter, Sherry, she says basically our house became a filming set. Like, it was no longer a home, it was a set. And Ruby had the kids change out all the light bulbs in the house to be brighter so that the lighting was right. And she's just like, everything was centered around looking perfect on the YouTube channel. And like I said, the kids start acting defiant and they're distant, and you can see it in this footage. And they start rebelling at school, especially Chad. So Chad ends up getting expelled from school. Chad is the oldest son. And this is when Chad enters therapy with a woman named Jodi Hildebrandt. And he enters into her therapy program, which is called Mentally Fit. And this is when things are going, this is the start of when things are going to go very sideways for the Franke family. Jodi Hildebrandt was viewed as a therapy guru. Now, first off, let's stop here. This is another red flag. Anybody who describes themselves or other people describe them as a guru, I already getting the ick, already getting red flag vibes. Like it just gives me, it's such a turnoff for me to watch life coaches and these motivational speakers. And I'm not saying that they're all bad, but I am just saying that I have seen far too many of them just say things with their whole chest, like they are the authority figure on whatever it is they are saying that they do well, that you should, how you should live your life. You should do this, you should do that. And they use these really like buzzworthy terms and how you should live your life. I'm turned off by all of it. So the fact that Jodi Hildebrandt was a guru already tells you red flag. But Ruby Franke and her family didn't see it that way. I mean, in the community, in the Mormon community and in Springville and Happy Valley and the surrounding areas, like Jodi Hildebrandt apparently was kind of like the person that you would go through if you really need like really good therapy, and she's the person who's going to solve all your problems. And she seemed highly credentialed. I think she told people that she was a psychologist, which was not true, that she had worked at some very prestigious drug rehab program, which I also believe was not true. So she sold herself as being like highly credentialed psychologist, like she said things with her whole chest with confidence and she spoke with authority. So people really believe that like Jodi Hildebrandt, like she's it, like she is a guru and this is who we need to go to. She's going to fix all our problems. And this happens so often that gurus present themselves as like a subject matter expert on whatever it is, life, healing from, drug addiction, family therapy, whatever, weight loss, health and fitness. And they say things with their whole chest. They say it with confidence and such conviction that they're like, I can solve your problems. I have the answers. If you follow my 12-step program, you will come out of this and your life will be better off for it. Like they say things like that and you're like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I need. And they're saying it so confidently. They must know their shit. Like they sign me up. And they charge for their services, obviously. And voila, you have a cult leader and a scam artist who's born. Because we just see it so many times. Like in MLMs, we see it with cult leaders. We see it with health and fitness gurus. Like it just is an entire red flag when people refer to themselves as being the guru of anything. But hidden behind the curtain are countless failures and lies of these gurus, these scam artist gurus, I should say. And I think that people often don't look behind the curtain when someone comes in with so much vigor and confidence and apparent legitimacy, especially when people you trust are legitimizing the scammer or the guru or the cult leader. And that's what people did with Jodi Hildebrandt. Ruby Franke knew people who knew of Jodi Hildebrandt, and those people were saying, yes, Ruby, this Jodi Hildebrandt is exactly who you need for your son Chad, who's acting out and getting, expelled from school. This is what he needs. And going back to Brandon Patrick, who's featured in the documentary, he actually shadowed Jodi Hildebrandt a few years prior to when all this happened. And he says that Jodi speaks with authority, and she came across as, I know how to do this, and I will tell you exactly how to solve all of your problems. And that is exactly what draws people in, and especially if you're particularly vulnerable. So if you are, let's just say, a mother who is desperate to get your child back on track. They're getting in trouble in school. They're failing out of school. They're doing drugs, whatever it is. And you see someone speaking with such confidence saying, I know exactly what you need, and I know exactly how to solve all your problems. Just follow me and my program to a T and you will be fine. And it's like you can totally understand why a vulnerable and desperate parent would be like, here's all my money, please solve my problems. And then they get scammed and they get taken for a ride and they fall under this narcissistic, manipulative, sociopathic person who really just wants to manipulate them, to brainwash them, to control their minds, and take all their money while they're at it. So Chad Franke enters therapy with Jodi Hildebrandt. And like I said, this is going to be the start of when things just go majorly sideways for the Franke family. Because, spoiler alert, Jodi Hildebrandt is hot trash in a barrel. She is not a good person. She's going to do nothing good for anybody but herself. And she really ought to stay far away from anybody, but especially children. But Chad Franke enters therapy with Jodi Hildebrandt, and in her very first meeting with Chad, she says, "You're lying. You're lying." So she calls Chad a liar, and Ruby Franke is sitting right there, and she loves it. She loves that Jodi is calling her son out. She's not buying his bullshit, that she's putting him in his place. And Ruby thinks this is exactly what my son needs to be a better person, to be a better behaved child. And Ruby strips Chad of everything. And I believe this is under the guidance of Jodi Hildebrandt. She sends him to a wilderness therapy camp. And also, Chad, his bedroom was removed and he was made to sleep on a beanbag in their basement for 7 months. And at first, Chad describes Jodi Hildebrandt as being fine. Like, he would laugh with her, he says, in his therapy sessions. He bonded with her. He looked up to her. He thought she was helping him. And he kind of loves and admires Jodi. And so Ruby Franke loves this. And so she ramps up his therapy sessions with Jodi up to 2 times a week. He's having these virtual sessions with Jodi. And knowing what we know about Jodi, basically what's happening is she's getting her claws into Chad, as she does with everybody, and she's manipulating him, and she's probably brainwashing him and not really giving him the helpful therapy that he needed, or maybe he didn't need. She is just manipulating him and getting his brain kind of under her control, as we're going to find out that she's going to do with this entire family. And it seems like, at least in Ruby's eyes, that Chad is getting back on track, and whatever these sessions he's having with Jodi are really helping him. Then you see this scene in the docuseries where it's a close-up of Ruby, Chad sitting next to her, and they're laughing and they're filming for the YouTube channel. And Chad basically slips up and he says, yeah, well, my parents took my bedroom away and I've been sleeping in the basement of our house on a beanbag for 7 months. And Ruby kind of laughs and she's like, I don't think the viewers know that, Chad. And he's like, well, that's the reality. Like, yeah, you guys took all my shit away. He doesn't say this, but he's like, you took my shit away and I'm sleeping on a beanbag. And so what happens from there is Ruby publishes that video to the YouTube channel thinking nothing of it. Well, all hell breaks loose, because this is going to be the start of the cancellation of the Franke family, because people start calling Ruby insane, horrible. Her followers felt sorry for Chad. They're like, no, that's not okay. That's mean. Your son should not be sleeping in the long term for 7 months on a freaking beanbag in the basement. So now Ruby Franke starts to get canceled, and she's no longer America's mom. She's a monster. She's mean, and people are not liking what she's doing to her kids. So much so that other creators start creating content about how much they hate Ruby Franke. And they're like, oh my God, look at this 8 passengers mom, and she's forcing her son to sleep on a beanbag, and she's abusive and she's mean, and basically just getting all this hate. So Ruby ends up taking the video down, but the damage is done. Like now their followers are kind of turning on the family and especially on Ruby Franke saying, yeah, no, we're suspicious of you now. And like I said, other creators are creating content that's only drawing more negative attention to the Franke family, but especially Ruby Franke, because she was really seen as like the head of that household. And I think by and large, she was. But now people are suspicious of the 8 passengers family. And they're like, are they all that happy? What's going on in that house? Is this abuse? And Ruby's devastated. She was America's mom and she loved all the adoration and she loved being seen as like the perfect mom. And now she's being seen as like this horrible monster. And her husband, Kevin, says in the docuseries, there was a lot of horror going on behind the scenes that I wasn't aware of. And I believe him, but we're going to talk at the end about my thoughts on Kevin because I saw some red flags there as well. And Ruby was downright mean. I mean, she instilled so much fear in her entire family, but especially her kids. I mean, they had to obey her to a T. Otherwise, there were going to be severe consequences. And by severe consequences, I mean downright abuse. There's this one scene where she's like, do you want me to I'm going to cut your stuffed animal's head right off if you don't listen to me. And the kid is just, the child looks to be like 7 years old, if that, and they're crying in the background. Like, imagine how traumatic that would be if you have like this stuffed animal or a stuffy that brings you comfort and it's like your friend, and your mom is like, well, I'll cut this damn doll's, head off if you don't obey me. It just was downright mean, but that's not even the worst of it. According to Chad, Ruby would blow up and she would spank and whip her kids. And Sherry, the oldest daughter, says that Chad got beaten really bad one time, so much so that Sherry, had to help him clean blood off the walls. He had a bloody nose. This is absolutely terrible and disgusting. So that right there tells you, and we're going to talk more about this at the end when we kind of wrap this up, but that tells you that Ruby was already a shit person before Jodi Hildebrandt came along. But Jodi Hildebrandt sort of really just escalated things and exacerbated things with Ruby. But Ruby was already a terrible person and an abusive mom. So now that Ruby Franke has been canceled by the internet, the brand deals are gone. And so that means the money is not flowing in like it used to. And there's a lawyer that suggests that Ruby apologized to her followers for being so mean to her son and her children. And she basically says, like, over my dead body, I'm saving my family. I'm not abusing my family. I am saving them. And we're going to find out that there's this running theme, this thought in Ruby's mind that she's cleansing them of their demons and she's making them more perfect, more clean. She's saving them so that they can get into heaven, I guess. And while all of this cancellation is going on and the brand deals are gone, Chad is still going, 2 times a week virtually to these therapy sessions with Jodi Hildebrandt. And Brannon Patrick, the therapist that I mentioned earlier, he says that Jodi Hildebrandt knew how to pray on the week and that she was kind of she was basically a man hater. She was very angry toward men. He also says there was another major red flag with Jodi Hildebrandt, and that was that she refused to pay him while he worked for her and shadowed her. So, there's that. But that's not going to be the worst thing that Jodi Hildebrandt is guilty of. And Brannon says that while he worked with Jodi, he had just seen like one too many families being torn apart by Jodi Hildebrandt's therapy. So again, she touts herself as this guru, this family therapist, when in reality, she is just I don't have the credentials to diagnose, but in my assessment, she's probably like a sociopathic, narcissistic, manipulative, abusive, controlling, greedy woman who really all she's doing is just brainwashing and manipulating and abusing people while she takes their money. She's not giving them the therapy they need at all. And then Jodi forms this connections class. And basically, this was just a way for her to scale her business, because now, instead of giving one-on-one therapy sessions, she's giving group therapy sessions. And so now all these people are paying her for this therapy, and this just scales her business on a massive level. And she was really good, Jodi, at exploiting Mormon anxiety. She knew that many Mormons feel a lot of pressure to be perfect, to be clean, to obey God's will. And she exploited that. So that makes them particularly vulnerable. And she preyed on that vulnerability as being like, I will help you get into heaven, essentially. Like, I'm going to teach you how to not be lustful, how to not be greedy, how to follow God's will and get into heaven. And it was just pure and utter chaotic, abusive bullshit. Ruby and Kevin eventually join Connections in 2019. And Jodi, basically, like, they show this footage of her, and over and over and over again, she will not stop saying lustful and greed and don't be selfish. So it's like, take a shot every time she talks about lust. Don't be lustful. Don't be selfish. Don't be greedy. Like, these are like the buzzwords that she liked to use a lot in her Connections classes and her therapy sessions. And from day one, Kevin Franke, he attends one Connections class with Jodi Hildebrandt, and he comes home and tells Ruby, he's like, this is a cult. Like, this is a straight up cult from day one. So kudos to him for calling it like he sees it, because that's exactly what Connections was. It wasn't helpful, meaningful group therapy. It was a fucking cult. But Ruby, on the other hand, loved Connections. This Connections class and everything that was taught and preached by Jodi Hildebrandt in these Connections classes, it just validated everything that was already in Ruby. And she was like 10 toes down, dive head first, like hooked on Connections. And at some point, Ruby convinces her husband, Kevin, to join Connections for Men. So you can see what Jodi's doing, right? So she has Mentally Fit, which is, I think, her one-on-one therapy sessions in quotes. Then she has Connections, which are her group therapy classes. And then she has Connections for Men. So she has all these different, basically, this is just her finding ways to bring in more money. And it worked. So Kevin reluctantly joins this Connections for Men group therapy session, and it's all virtual. So it's all these men, and they say in the documentary that basically, like, the majority of the men had they had addictions to porn. And this Connections for Men and Jodi's therapy was going to supposedly help them overcome their porn addiction, but it wasn't going to. I mean, surprise, surprise. But in these group sessions for men, she would just berate the men, belittle them, and be like, don't be greedy, don't be lustful, And it was probably just her way to get all her anger toward men out, instead of actually helping them with their addictions. And at this point, soon after they joined Connections, Ruby and her husband Kevin's relationship as a married couple seemed to get better. They seemed happy. They were going out on these vacations and flirting with each other. And it just looked like it was just all bliss. Like, oh my God, Jodi has just opened up this whole new, pathway in our relationship for us to be just like soups happy and whatever. And basically the Franke kids report that during this time, Ruby kind of stopped being mean to them. And I want to say it's probably because her attention was elsewhere. She had a new addiction. Her new addiction was no longer getting her kids to be perfect on film for their YouTube channel because she got canceled. Now she has Connections. And so this is going to be her new obsession. And so now she's like, for the time being, she's able to leave her kids alone for the most part. And very quickly after Ruby and Kevin joined this Connections thing with Jodi trains Ruby to be a coach, a Connections coach. And this just reminded me so much of every single MLM that I'm aware of. And it's like you have all these people that, like, let's just say it's like a health and wellness MLM that's like, hey, drink these shakes and you're going to lose 20 pounds. You're going to be so healthy, and then they train just like lay people to be health coaches. And it's like, what kind of like real certifications and courses have you taken to tell people how they should be living a healthy lifestyle? Like my point is like, you really don't have any proper training, but we're going to call you a coach. It's going to make you sound really official. And now you're going to go out and push these shakes and workouts on people. And it just is very scammy to me. And the fact that somebody like Ruby Franke was a coach or any kind of authority on how anybody should live their lives and raise their kids, oh my God, like run for your lives, run for the hills, because the last fucking person you want telling you how to raise your family and your kids and live your life is freaking Ruby Stanky. While Jodi Hildebrandt is absolute trash, she's not stupid. She knows that Ruby and her husband Kevin have some influence in the connections courses and among the community of people who are in connections. And so she really, she makes them kind of the face and the voice of connections. And that just brings more people in. And it's described in the docuseries that Jodi Hildebrandt really was all about the money. She was all about the status. She loved money, status, and she really tended to favor clients who had status. And she was just kind of icky like that. Whereas you would think that a therapist just wanted to help people and didn't give a shit, what their status was. But she was very much about what is in this for me. And she liked to be near fame and near money. So because 8 Passengers, the YouTube channel, essentially got canceled because the viewers are no longer buying Ruby's bullshit, 8 Passengers becomes Moms of Truth, which was basically Ruby giving up her idea and succumbing to Jodi's overall vision. And this is just sort of like Ruby kind of like folding into whatever it is that Jodi was doing. And then we start seeing a lot of videos being posted, Moms of Truth videos, where it's Jodi and Ruby sitting side by side wearing their little McDonald's headsets. And they are just spewing a bunch of fucking bullshit, like a bunch of icky, dark, manipulative bullshit. Like to me, I'm saying what it came off to me as. Like their content was kind of darker in nature, kind of like, you got to do this with your kids and your kids need to repent and your woke child is a demon and it's just a bunch of bullshit. But this is what they were selling in their videos together. And there's this one time when they're doing a video together and Ruby starts to get emotional and you see Jodi's hand sort of slowly make its way over to Ruby's knee. And she's like, softly like caressing her knee. And listen, I have friends and that's not something I do with my friends. Now, that's not to say that I am the authority on what we should and shouldn't do with friends. I'm just saying it's giving more than just friends is what I want to say. It's giving that Jodi wanted more than just a friendship with Ruby. It definitely wasn't giving friendship vibes. It was giving like there's a lot more going on between these two, and which is absolutely okay. Well, now it's not okay because Ruby's married, but it just made it clear to me that there's something more going on between these two women. They're not just biz partners. Then March of 2020, the pandemic hits. Kevin says that he and Ruby thought this was the second coming of Christ. Like they had been waiting for something big to happen. And Kevin says in the documentary that essentially they thought everyone else was going to burn, but that they were going to survive it. Like the world is ending, but for whatever reason, because it sounds like they've, done everything right in their lives, I guess. Kevin thinks like, yeah, everybody else is going to burn, but we're going to survive this second coming, the world ending. So then what does Ruby start doing? She starts doomsday prepping with her girl, Jodi. And Jodi starts educating people about the end of the world. And this is precisely when it gets ultra, ultra, ultra scammy to me. Like this is just, there are so many red flags here, but especially when they want to start teaching you about the end of the world. Now listen, everybody can believe whatever they want to believe, but I will tell you here and now, for me, it just sounds like cuckoo. For me, preparing for the end of the world sounds not at all rational. But I know there are people who believe that, and that's fine for you. But for me, as a viewer, when I'm watching people educating people about the end of the world, I'm like, this is a big fucking waste of time. Like, listen, the sun is going to explode at some point. That's going to be far after I'm dead and all of us, anybody who's alive right now is alive, knock on wood. But it just is giving so scammy to me, so culty. And Ruby's thought process during that time was that Jodi's been called by God, and that God also came to her, Ruby, and built her up through her YouTube channel and her platform and basically her microphone to the world. And that Jodi and Ruby were destined to come together and share truth to the world. And this is truly what Ruby believed, that she and Jodi were destined to be together so that they could spread the word of God and share truth to the world. And Kevin says he also believed that Jodi was chosen by God for this purpose. So he's drinking the Kool-Aid too. In May 2021, Jodi calls Ruby over to her mansion in St. George and says that she's being haunted by hooded, shadowy figures at night and that Satan has it out for me. So, and again, for me, I'm going to stop right here and say, like, this was all planned by Jodi, right? Jodi is slowly orchestrating this move to get Ruby right where she wants her, and that's with her and away from her family. So Jodi calls Ruby over, and Kevin and Jodi basically drive 4 hours from their house in Happy Valley out to Jodi's secluded mansion in St. George. And they enter the home, and they truly believe that Jodi is being possessed by demons and that Satan's after her. And basically, Kevin describes it as, listen, after we were already waiting for something big to happen. And then you have the pandemic. That was their first sign that, oh my God, this is the end of the world coming and the second coming of Christ. And now this is just further proof that Jodi is now being possessed by demons and by Satan. And this is truly showing us the world's going to end and we better be prepared. And when they arrive at Jodi's mansion, she's distraught. I mean, she's crying, she's closing her eyes and, I'm possessed by Satan. And basically in the docuseries, it's described that Jodi's house is this expansive, secluded, modern style mansion that has 4 levels, and the 2 ground levels, the underground levels, were basically just a big unit for doomsday prepper shit. Like, she had all the shit, like the canned goods, the cereal, whatever you do. I don't know what doomsday preppers get, but it's probably like toilet paper, canned beans, canned everything, food with a lot of preservatives that'll last 1 billion years. All right, so back to Jodi being possessed by Satan. There's this bishop that visits her house, and Jodi's just like flailing around and she's growling. And basically, to me, she's putting on a show. She wants to convince Ruby and Kevin that she truly is possessed by Satan. Because to me, this is just going to set her up for her next move, which is to oust Kevin and the older son from the family so that she can have Ruby essentially all to herself. So Ruby and Kevin are at Jodi's mansion and she's possessed by Satan. They believe it. And basically Ruby's like, well, we've got to help her. Like, but she needs to come live with us so I can take care of her. Like, that's what a friend would do. So they bring Jodi, this guru multimillionaire therapist, and she takes over their oldest daughter's bedroom, Sherry, who's about to go to college. And they kick her ass out of her bedroom, and Jodi lives with them. And to me, this is exactly what Jodi wanted. Like, this was just the next phase in her plan to get Ruby all to herself. Meanwhile, Sherry Franke, the oldest daughter, is so sus on Jodi. And she starts poking around, like red flags are popping up for her. And she Googles Jodi, and she finds out that Jodi is not a psychologist. And she finds out that her license to practice therapy has been revoked. And she also finds out that Jodi's kids don't even talk to her. So here's this like family and marriage therapist, psychologist, whatever guru, who is divorced, has children who don't speak to her, isn't a psychologist, even though she said she was, and her license has been revoked. And here she is spreading her message to the world. So essentially, Sherry Franke went behind the curtain, and a lot of people don't, but Sherry did. So Sherry tells her mom, she's like, look, mom and dad, Jodi's, she tells her all the things she learned about Jodi. Like Jodi's kids don't talk to her license has been revoked, all these things. She's not a psychologist, as she says she was. And Ruby and Kevin think nothing of it. They're like, yeah, Sherry, whatever. Like she's, been sent by God and she's possessed by Satan and we got to help her. And meanwhile, Jodi's keeping up this freaking Satan bit and it pisses me off to even watch it. But there's this footage of her just growling and moaning and groaning and just like she's possessed by Satan. And she basically says, like Jodi says, oh, these troubled people are trying to take me down. And she goes into these possessed trances and she starts speaking in other voices. And she's growling, saying, she's mine. I own her. And it's like, look, bitch, these words are telling us a lot. And in my opinion, she's basically talking about Ruby Franke because she wants to own and possess Ruby. And so she's like, she's mine. I own her. As if like if she says these words, she's going to get Kevin and everybody around her to believe that like Ruby needs to be hers. That's the way I took it. And we all know the bitch is referring to Ruby Franke, right? Like we know that she's just trying to get Ruby Franke to be her girlfriend. And these other voices are just utter bullshit. Like she's not possessed by Satan, but she has Kevin and Ruby buying into this bullshit and they believe it. So then what happens next? Ruby tells her husband, Kevin, well, clearly I need to be staying in this bedroom with Jodi because that's what a friend would do. And Jodi's probably like, yes, like, I'm possessed by Satan, but yes, because that's exactly what she wants. She's getting Ruby closer and closer to her and further away from her own family. And basically they start sleeping in bed together and under the guise of Ruby's being a good friend and helping her get through her satanic possession. But Sherry goes into her old bedroom at one point where Jodi and her mom Ruby are now staying together. And she sees some peculiar items on the desk. She sees candles and massage oil. And she's thinking, okay, what is going on here? And basically Sherry says it. Yeah, like I think there was more going on with my mom and Jodi. I do think they were lovers. And I also think that, spoiler alert, like they probably were lovers. And, whether Ruby wanted that or not, or whether it was like Jodi's manipulation that got Ruby to get into an alleged relationship with her, who knows? But it seems pretty clear to me that that is what was going on. And now that Jodi's got her girl, she's got Ruby sleeping in bed with her, like she's got her as close as she can be, her last step is to get rid of Kevin, get him out of the picture. And so she does just that. And separation is also another control tactic by manipulators and cult leaders. They will very skillfully separate you from your family so that they can have ultimate control over you. And that is exactly what Jodi did. And we'll talk about how she did that in a moment. But first, let's talk about the fact that in December 2021, this particular Christmas, the two youngest children got no presents from Santa Claus. And that was because they were being punished for being too selfish. And so they had to sit there during Christmas and watch their older siblings open all these gifts, but they got absolutely nothing. And apparently Jodi and or Ruby talked about this in their connections, what is it called? Moms of Truth videos. And again, they started to get all these negative comments like, what a bitch, what a monster. Who doesn't give their kids Christmas gifts, give some of their kids Christmas gifts, but the others, they have to sit there and be tortured while they watch their older siblings open gifts. Like that's just, what kind of monster would do that? And meanwhile, Jodi had Chad, the oldest son, in an absolute chokehold, as she did basically the entire family, except for Sherry. Sherry was sus on Jodi almost like from day one, but she had Chad. Jodi had Chad on a chokehold, and she had him believing that he needed to confess his bad deeds and poor behavior to her anytime he just got out of line with what God would want him to do, I guess. And so he was convinced that he needed to confess to Jodi anytime he made out with a girl, Mind you, he's like an older teenager, and that's what teenagers do. They make out with each other. And he also thought that he needed to confess anytime he watched pornography. So he goes and tells Jodi, and Jodi says, well, you need to tell your mom. So Chad goes and tells his mom, look, Mom, I've made out with some girls. I've watched porn. And Ruby is absolutely devastated and very visibly upset with her son. And what does she do? She blames what Chad is doing behind closed doors, making out with girls and watching porn. She blames that on being the reason that the demons and Satan have possessed Jodi. Like basically like Chad's extracurricular activities have brought Satan into their home and into possessing Jodi. So what does Ruby do? She kicks her oldest son out of the house at the age of 17. She says, bye. Basically, she's like, you're holding me and Jodi back from getting into heaven. And I'm sure it was Jodi who planted that seed. I'm sure Jodi in one of their massage oil sessions was like, listen, bitch, you need to get rid of that boy. He's watching porn. He's the one who brought these damn demons, these pesky demons inside of me. You got to get rid of them. And so Ruby did. Now the only one left, the adult in the home to get rid of, is Kevin. So then Ruby blames Kevin's lustful thoughts that he's been hiding apparently on all this demon possession and the reason that Chad was, acting out and doing bad things. And she's like, you got to go too. So Ruby kicks Kevin, her own husband, out of the house. So now that leaves Ruby, Jodi, and the younger minor children because Sherry's already off at college. And basically Ruby tells her husband, look, you're holding me and Jodi back from fulfilling God's will. You got to go. And basically this was just Jodi and Ruby finding things wrong with Chad and Kevin so that they could just be alone together. That's what that was. And in my opinion, Ruby's motivation was different than Jodi's. I think that Ruby's motivation was to fulfill God's will and to get into heaven. Whereas I think that Jodi's motivation was to have Ruby for herself sexually and monetarily, because Ruby meant dollar signs to her. And while Ruby was already mean and abusive to her family to get them to be obedient and to be clean, she became even more so under Jodi's control. I mean, everything was ramped up. Any mean bone she had in her body got even meaner, and any abusive behavior got more harshly abusive. The abuse definitely got worse. So Kevin moves into an apartment. He's isolated. He's not speaking to anyone, not even his wife. Like Ruby basically cut off all contact with everybody except for Jodi and the children that were still in the house. And Kevin won't even speak to his oldest daughter, Sherry, when she reaches out to him just to kind of see how he's doing. He advises her not to speak with him or to speak with her brother, Chad. And ultimately, Kevin ends up blocking Sherry, his oldest daughter. Like, don't talk to me. He blocks her. So basically, both of Sherry's parents, Sherry and Chad's parents, they disown Sherry. They kick Chad out of the house at 17, and they've kicked Kevin out of the house. And so these kids, these minor children, are left in the home, and Sherry is very worried about her siblings, as she should be. Meanwhile, Ruby and Jodi are still putting out these trash videos, and the content is getting darker and darker, and the viewers are noticing. They're like, ugh, this content, it used to be so light and bright. Now it's just dark. What's going on with the Franke family? Are they okay? And in one video, Ruby's like, your woke child is a walking zombie. And she's so lost in the sauce at this point. And these poor minor children, the Franke children who are left in the house, they are just having to be militant obedient to their mother and Jodi. They're cleaning the house all day long. They're obeying Ruby's orders, and they've just basically have no joy left in their lives. No joy, nothing to live for, nothing to be excited about, no happiness. And according to Ruby, they've lost their light. Well, I wonder the fuck why. Meanwhile, Kevin, even though he's been kicked out of the house and cut off from all contact from his wife and his children, he's still attending Jodi's men's group therapy sessions. And he describes it as his way of just trying to do everything he can to get back in the good graces of Jodi and his wife. He wants to please them, and basically so that he can go back to the family home. Like, he's just like wanting to do whatever he has to do to also be obedient and fulfill whatever they want him to fulfill, and to be able to get back into his family home. And Jodi really set it up this way. She set it up so that the entire family, including Ruby and Kevin, that they all needed to go to her for permission to do just about anything. There's this one video that Jodi and Ruby are filming together, and Ruby says something like, "I love principles more than my own child." And Jodi goes, "Ooh." And it's like probably exactly what she wants to hear, right? Like, Ruby is so freaking brainwashed that she's like, "I love principles," whatever that means, "more than my own children." And which is readily apparent because she apparently hates her children because she treats them like absolute trash. And what we'll find out is that Ruby is leaving her children, her minor children, home alone for days at a time, while she travels from Springville, Utah, 4 hours away to St. George to go film videos and be with Jodi at her mansion. And these kids are being left home alone that entire time. On September 18th, 2022, Sherry, the oldest daughter, calls 911, and she basically says that neighbors have told her that her siblings are being left home alone for days at a time, and she's worried. So she asks if they could go check on them. So the police show up, but nobody answers the door for the welfare check. And basically, we find out that a judge wouldn't sign a warrant for them to enter the home. So there's really nothing that law enforcement can do at that time. And at this point, everybody's concerned about the Franke family, especially the kids. The comments on their social media are all negative and of concern. They're like, "Oh my God, what about the kids? What's going on with this family? This is weird. This is dark." Then in August 2023, in St. George, Utah, where Jodi lives, the youngest Franke's son goes to a neighbor's doorstep, and this is all captured on Ring footage at the neighbor's house that he goes to. He walks up, he rings the doorbell, and he basically asks this elderly neighbor, he asks him for 2 favors. He says, "Can you do me 2 favors?" Basically, he ends up telling the man, he says, "I need you to take me to the nearest police station." And when the elderly man says, "Oh yeah, what's this about?" Something like that. And the little boy, this broke my heart, he says, "It's personal business." So it's almost like he knew that he probably wasn't supposed to like tell on his mom for what she was doing, but he knew enough that he needed to go to the cops. Like, he needed to be taken to a police station. He knew what was happening to him and his younger sibling was wrong. And this young boy at the time was 12 years old. He was emaciated. He was thirsty. He had bloody duct tape around his wrists and ankles. And this part's so hard. At some point, the young boy is asked, "Where's your sister? Where's your little sister? Or I don't know if she's younger than him, but where's your sister?" He says, "I haven't seen her in over a month." And she was living in the same house as him. So basically, we would find out that this young boy who was 12 years old and his sister were living with Ruby and Jodi in Jodi's mansion in St. George, but they were being kept in separate sections of the house. And so they hadn't seen each other for over a month, and they live in the same house. And that's because Jodi and Ruby kept them apart. They kept them restrained. And clearly, these children were being severely malnourished and abused and restrained. And it just is so awful. And you know that this little boy, it becomes very clear that this little boy saved him and his sister's lives, because it's very evident that he was thirsty and he had not been given enough water, enough food, enough nourishment, enough attention, enough anything. And we would find out just how horrible the abuse was. But he definitely is a hero, and he definitely saved him and his sister's lives. And wow, I'm just so grateful that he was able to get away from that house and have the wherewithal to go to a neighbor's house and ask for help. Then we see footage of Jodi Hildebrandt's arrest, and she's just such a freaking Karen. Like, they open the door, she's on the phone. She's like, I'm on the phone with my lawyer. And they're like, yeah, step outside. And she's like, I'm not stepping outside. And so they grab her by the arm and she's like, they're taking me. And basically they arrest this bitch. And it's just so satisfying to see her apprehended and taken into custody. So then the police are searching Jodi's mansion because they know that this is where the boy escaped from. And they're looking for the rest of the kids. And so they go to a certain part of the house and they find this door, and it looks like one of those huge, like 6 foot tall stand-up safes. And it's a safe door, but it looks like the door to a room in the house. And so they go to Jodi and they're like, look, we need the combination to that safe door so we can go check that whatever room is behind that door. And she lies and she's like, oh, I don't think I know the combination, because clearly she doesn't want them to go into this room, this secret room in the house that's behind this safe door. And eventually there's a police lieutenant and he goes and he's like, fuck it. I need to go behind this. I need to find out what's behind this door. And he punches in like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and the door opens. So I'm sorry. I think I said that Jodi Hildebrandt was somewhat smart earlier. I'm going to take that back because I'm sorry, but what idiot makes the combination 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? Jodi Hildebrandt did. And so the lieutenant and his, colleagues, the other policemen are able to go into this room. And basically this room, they find all of this shit that makes it very clear that these kids were being abused and tortured and restrained, because they find things like gauze, bloody gauze. They find this like weird cayenne pepper solution that apparently they were putting on the kids' ankle and wrist wounds that they would get from being restrained for so long. And this part is really hard too. Eventually, police find the 12-year-old boy's sister, and she's sitting kind of like crisscross applesauce in the middle of this bedroom, and she's just sitting there alone, and her head is completely shaved. She has no hair. And she's skinny, she's emaciated, and she will not speak one word. And you can hear the authorities' voices, and they're being very tender with her. Oh, the policeman is saying something like, it's okay, like, we're not going to hurt you. Are you okay? And she won't talk to them. And it's just very clear that she's just been so psychologically abused that she can't even utter any words. She's just completely mute. So luckily, the kids are now safe, and authorities have arrested Jodi Hildebrandt. They've found the children and taken them into their custody. And then, while this is all going on, Kevin gets a phone call from Ruby completely out of the blue. He hadn't heard from his wife in over a year. So, of course, he answers it, and she tells him that their 2 younger children are demonically possessed. She proceeds to tell Kevin, listen, you need to go pick up the children from the police. This is your chance to redeem yourself. And so Kevin just jumps at it. He's like, I was going to go save my children, and I was just going to go pick them up from the police, and this was going to get me back in the good graces of my wife, and I was going to be like the hero. Meanwhile, back at Jodi's mansion, authorities eventually catch up with Ruby, and she's just sitting on the couch. And she has this blank, eerie look on her face as they arrest her. So Kevin does come to the police station. In his mind, as he describes it in the documentary, he's like, I was just going to go pick up my kids and get the hell out of there. He says he didn't know the bigger picture of like really what was going on with Jodi and Ruby and his younger children. So he gets there and police start interrogating him and trying to determine, like, are you culpable in any of this child abuse? And Kevin is still very much lost in the sauce. He says at this point, and I tend to believe him up to a certain point, that he still believed that Jodi was sent by God, and that the work that she and Ruby were doing was helping society and helping their children. And so he was a bit hesitant to be forthright with authorities when he's being interrogated. And they ask him at some point, well, who was it that called you and told you you needed to come pick up the kids? And he doesn't tell him. He doesn't tell him that it was Ruby, because in his words, he says, I still thought like I could potentially be lied to and manipulated by these authorities. Meanwhile, my wife and Jodi are doing such great work. I didn't want to screw anything up. But eventually he's going to come to, and he's going to pop out of it, and he's going to realize like what Jodi and his wife were doing was absolutely disgusting and awful and criminal. So Jodi and Ruby are charged with 6 counts of child abuse. And authorities learned that the youngest boy, while he was under the care, in quotes, of Jodi and Ruby in the desert of St. George, he's being forced to stand in the sun all day long. He was forced to jump on a trampoline all day. He was tied down with weights and forced to run in the hot desert. So what these kids went through was just beyond terrible and vile. And I'm just so thankful that they made it out alive. And it's because of the bravery of the 12-year-old boy, the Franke boy. And I just hope they're okay today. So authorities go back to Jodi's mansion because they need to search for more evidence. And they found a treasure trove. And one of those bits of evidence was Ruby's journal, where she basically had written everything down. And some of the things that she had written in her journal were, "I will not feed a demon. I told the boy he emulates a snake. Kids need to be 100% obedient and engage in exactness." So the fact that Ruby wouldn't even call her son by his actual name in her journal tells you that she had just completely lost touch, and that she had completely emotionally distanced herself from these children. She now saw them as demons. That why would I feed a demon? This is what must have been going through her brain of, and some people might argue that this is just an excuse for her to abuse her children freely without judgment. But in her journal, she was writing things like, "I will not feed a demon." So whether you believe it or not, it was described in the documentary that Ruby was actually helping her children by starving the demon. And again, some would argue that, the LDS Church and Mormonism, they teach that no unclean thing can get into heaven. So somebody like Ruby takes to abusing her children because in her mind, allegedly, that this would get them to repent and become clean so that they could get into heaven. At some point, Kevin and his oldest son, they end up reuniting when they meet at the family home in Happy Valley. And they walk inside and the house is absolutely trashed and it's empty. And the neighbors inform Kevin, "Yeah, your wife and the kids were going to move. Like they were going to move out of this house." And he claims he had no idea that his family was moving out of their family home. And Kevin's just shocked. And it's at this point when he sits down with the neighbors and has like an hours-long conversation with them, and they update him on all that was actually really going on with Ruby and Jodi and the children, and that they were being left home alone for days and ultimately being abused and tortured over at Jodi's house. This is when Kevin starts to realize that he and members of his family were just being brainwashed by Jodi. And he says this is kind of when he came to accept that what Jodi and his wife were actually doing was terrible and not God's will. 4 months after Jodi's arrest, she pleads guilty to 4 counts of child abuse, and these are second-degree felonies. Ruby takes a plea deal, and she also pleads guilty to 4 counts of aggravated child abuse. And Ruby claims in court after she's, pleads guilty, she claims that she was in a deep undercurrent and she was disoriented and that she's sorry. And she says that she was disoriented over the past 4 years. Each of the women, their sentences, they will serve up to 30 years in prison. So I don't know if they will serve all of that, but let's just hope they serve at least most of it for what they did. And Chad in the docuseries, kind of reflecting back on all that's happened, he's an adult now. He says he still has love for his mother. And then you have Kevin in the docuseries, and I found this surprising. When asked if he still loves his wife, Ruby Franke, he does not hesitate. And he says, oh, definitely, definitely. And I imagine, I could be wrong, I imagine that this is particularly offensive and irritating to somebody like Sherry. Now, Sherry, the oldest daughter, she says, I will never speak to Ruby again. And I don't even know if she still talks to Kevin, her father, because she refers to her parents as Ruby and Kevin in the documentary. So she's not even calling them mom or dad. And she flat out says, I will never speak to Ruby again. I don't know where she stands with her father. As of today, Chad has built a following on social media as an influencer. I checked his Instagram bio. It shows that he's a realtor and he has 348,000 followers on Instagram. So he seems to be doing well. I didn't really probe too much. And Sherry, the oldest daughter, Sherry Franke, she's currently campaigning against family vlogging. And she published a book called The House of My Mother, a memoir reflecting on child abuse at the hands of her mother. So Sherry has taken the stance of family vlogging is wrong, and it's wrong particularly for the children, because they can't really consent to that. And as they get older, they might not only grow to regret being on camera their whole lives because they can't really consent as minors, but also like they didn't ask for that, their lives to be documented for the world to see. And as we all know, the internet never goes away. What goes on the internet stays on the internet. And so she is campaigning against family vlogging for that reason, and I'm sure other valid reasons as well. And Kevin did ultimately file for divorce from Ruby, even though he claims he still loves her. I don't know what's going on there. And as far as my thoughts on this docuseries, I want to reiterate that the boy, he was 12 years old at the time. I don't know his name. I guess I should have looked that up. But the boy who escaped Ruby and Jodi's abuse and was able to save him and his sister, he's an absolute hero. And my heart broke for the entire family, but especially for the younger kids who were left behind. And when the abuse really, really, really ramped up. But he is a hero, no doubt about it. And those poor children never would have lived up to their mother and Jodi's standards. They never would have been good enough, never would have been clean enough, never would have been, repented enough, because the values, the goals, the expectations that Jodi and Ruby set for these kids, they were absolutely unattainable. There is no child, no human, no adult, nobody on this earth who would ever achieve the level of obedience and exactness that these two trash women expected of them. And it just was awful because they were never going to attain that, which tells me they were going to die in that home. They were going to die in that home because Ruby was not going to feed and nourish and hydrate and love her children as any guardian, parental guardian should. Those children, no doubt, would have died in that eerie, creepy house in St. George, no doubt. And I really wish we would have heard from Jodi Hildebrandt's family in this docuseries, because we didn't. I have so many questions. What caused the divorce? Why don't her two children talk to her? I mean, I have some ideas. But what I was able to find out, just a preliminary review of research on Jodi, was that she was born in 1969. She grew up Mormon, one of 7 kids, and she grew up in Arizona and Utah. Jodi did say at one point that she was the victim of child sex abuse at a young age. And in 2012, her license to be a clinical mental health counselor after she revealed private patient info. So she was already like dysfunctional and unethical way before all this scammy shit with connections and mentally fit and whatever she was doing, or the therapy she was giving to these Mormon families. So I want to say that after her license to practice therapy was revoked, that's when Jodi pivoted to connections and basically touted herself as a life coach, because a scammer is going to scam no matter what. If this scam doesn't work out over here, well, then maybe this one will. And connections was just a brand new scam. And I'm sorry, but life coaching is a scam too. Sorry, I said it, not sorry. I don't know what qualifies somebody as a life coach. Like, how do you become qualified to tell other people how they should live their lives? I just am so curious what those qualifications and credentials are. And then Jodi became really popular with many members of the LDS church, despite her being divorced and estranged from her 2 children. And in my opinion, I think that Ruby Franke's demise was a combination of religious guilt, pressure, anxiety to be perfect, pressure to be clean, to get into heaven, as well as her already being an inherently bad person and mother. Like, I think that these things were already in Ruby. She was already abusive and mean to her children and to her family. That was already in her. But then when she crossed paths with somebody like Jodi Hildebrandt, it basically validated Ruby's already twisted beliefs. And then she just fell under Jodi's control and manipulation, and boom, you literally have like the perfect storm of 2 troubled and abusive people. And when they come together, it has devastating consequences. And I think that Jodi gave Ruby permission to be mean and abusive to her kids. And I do think that any person, religion, organization that pushes unattainable goals and expectations and values on any human being is inevitably going to lead to those people being insecure, feeling like they're not enough, that they're just not perfect enough, and always striving to be more perfect and always reaching out to others, these gurus, to help them be more perfect and to really attain these unattainable expectations and goals. Let's talk about Kevin really quick. So Kevin Franke, I think he wants us to believe that he just was lost in the sauce and that he loved his wife and his religion and his children so much that he just believed everything that Ruby was saying, and that when Jodi came along, he believed her too, and he was under her manipulation and her control, and that he just fell into this brainwashing type of situation, and that he didn't really know or understand what was really happening. And when he left the home, he thought that he was just obeying orders to not talk to his kids. But in reality, abandoning your kids and blocking them and not communicating them when they need you the absolute most in their lives, that's trash. That is not being a good parent. That is not going the distance for your children, especially when they need you. He pushed them away. Now, I do believe there was a combination. I always say like 2, 3, 4 things can be true at the same time. I do think that Kevin was being manipulated. I do think that he was a bit lost in the sauce and that he was under the control and a bit brainwashed. But I think that he also needs to accept accountability, and he has some culpability in ultimately what happened to his family and especially what happened to his children. He wasn't there for them when they needed him the most, and they could have died. His youngest children could have died. And I will not say that that's all on him, because I don't think it is, but you have to accept some responsibility. And it sounds like he did, but I also think he also tried to put most of it on Ruby. So it's just this icky, blurred line. And so I guess in order of culpability, if I had to like rate these 3 people in order of culpability, I think that Jodi is the most culpable. But I think Ruby is like a real close second, because Ruby was already going back to when Sherry said she had to help clean blood off the walls because Chad had gotten beaten. I'm assuming that it was Ruby, although they don't say, but I'm assuming it was Ruby who beat him. That right there is criminal. That right there is child abuse. So I don't know. Jodi and Ruby are trash. Okay. Maybe they're equal trash. I do think that a trash person like Ruby, who's already a bad person and a bad mom, I also do think they can even be worse if they're under the control of somebody like Jodi. And I think that's what happened. And then at the lower level of culpability, I would say that's Kevin, but he does have some culpability. Okay. And also with regard to Kevin, now, again, I know that you can't judge somebody's emotional response to say that you know what's going on with them or you don't know what's going on with them. In other words, I didn't see the level of emotion from Kevin that I thought I would see from a father reliving very, very, very painful details about the absolute torture and abuse and malnourishment of his own children. You would think that he would just be crumbling to pieces before our very eyes, reliving this or crying and just showing some emotion, but I didn't see that from him. So I just felt like, I don't know if they edited those parts out. I don't know the context, but I will just say, I just think something's a little off with Kevin emotionally. That was my opinion. Call me judgy, but that's the way I read it. Something's off with him. All right, we're going to end this one, you guys. This one was really, really tough. I want to know your thoughts on this documentary, this story, this case. Make sure you're following me on social media at Jami on Air. That's Jami on Air. That's on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. I am very, very engaged. So let me know what you guys thought about this one. I want to hear your hot takes, your unpopular opinions, your thoughts, your theories. Give it all to me. Make sure you are also subscribed to the YouTube channel at Jami on Air. And if you want to listen to this in audio form, make sure you are following Murderish, the podcast, because that's where all of these Serial Streamers episodes live. So if you are into podcasts, subscribe to Murderish and you will get all of the Serial Streamers episodes. If you're more into video content, subscribe to my YouTube channel at Jami on Air. Thanks so much for watching and listening. And remember, be that bitch when it comes to your safety. Always keep your doors locked, leave your lights on at night, and never, ever, ever leave your drinks unattended. Stay safe.